Okay, good day everyone. I have made a few audios so far, and there are many dealing with definitions because that was my base topic, understanding the Bible. I went into explaining what is God, then I went into explaining what are spirits. Now, this topic, I'm going to explain what is a human being. Okay. Now, you would have to be very patient, and I would please ask you to be very patient as I go into this because this is going to explain a lot of things in relation to what is a human being. So, there we go. A human being is a living soul. You could see this written in Genesis chapter 2, verse 7. Now, I do not know if you can recall, but I made mention in the audio, understanding the Bible, that Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 to 27, human beings were created by God. Now, from the beginning of time, even unto that time, was the sixth day when God created human beings. I would please like you to consider what I said in the audio, which was entitled, What is God, in relation to what I'm about to say now. Remember, God is one but yet free, just as a whole chewing gum that is divided into three. Yet it is one chewing gum. So, as God says in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, let us make man or mankind in our image after our likeness. The words us and our applies to something or someone, plural, or more than one. Yet, in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, we read, male and female created he them. And the word ye applies to something or someone that is singular, and that he referred to God. So God created human beings to be like him. The term image after our likeness does not represent the outward appearance or structure, but rather what is the kind of being. Now, reciprocally, when the term likeness after image is used in Genesis chapter 5, verse 3, this represents the outward appearance or structure. So, in image after likeness means that human beings were created in the same kind of being as God. And in the case of Adam, in relation to his own son Seth, Seth looks like Adam in appearance. Now, the beauty of God created mankind like this is this. Each human being is made up of three parts, even as God is three, but one God. These parts are the body, soul, and spirit. This can clearly be identified in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 23. Now, I will get to explaining the parts of a human being later on in this audio. Continuing, we see in Genesis chapter 1 verse 26, God giving human beings an innate ability to rule over animals of the sea, the birds, the animals of the earth, and also the animals that creep on the earth. Furthermore, we see that God blesses them. Now, to bless something is to adore it with the consent of good things occurring on its behalf. The first blessing of God towards mankind on the sixth day of creation was to be fruitful and multiply, replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion or rule over every animal that can be found in the sea, on the earth, or in the air. Now, Genesis chapter 1 verse 27 identifies human beings as male and female. Then, in Genesis chapter 1 verse 29, God gives the consent of food to mankind to be the seed-bearing tree, as well as any tree of which the fruit bears its seed. So, examples of trees that only bear the seed straightway would be various peas, corn, and also grains as wheat and barley. And an example of trees that bear fruits with their seeds in them would be apples, mangoes, grapes, and oranges. Now, let us get into explaining the parts of a human being. The body, soul, and spirit of a human being does not function the same way. If you consider Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 to 28, and then you read through onto Genesis chapter 2, you'd realize that although God had said and done all these things for human beings, they were not active or animated on earth, as said in Genesis chapter 2, verse 5. Every other thing, an animal, was active, as we see in Genesis chapter 1, but not human beings. It was only in Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, God formed a body for the male human being. This was on the 8th day from when God began to create the heaven and the earth. It was only by a body that mankind was and is able to function in the earth. Furthermore, it was only in between the 8th and the 9th day that the first human being's body was formed by God. By Genesis chapter 1, verse 27 to 28, we know that the body of a human being exists to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it with all life therein. So no doubt, by this we know that the body of a human being was made for a lot of diverse or different activity. Now, I will not go into details of every part of the human body, but I will make note of a few in order to have a summary of the body. The eyes of the body is to see, and we could see this written in Genesis chapter 31, verse 12. The nose was made to breathe or to be active on earth. You could see this in Genesis chapter 2, verse 7. The nose was also made for to smell or appeal and or disregard something, as you could see in Numbers chapter 11, verse 20. But I advise to read from Numbers chapter 11, verse 10 to 20. By that, you'll be able to understand why I referred to that part of the scripture. The hairs of the body was made to hair. Matthew chapter 13, verse 9 would tell that. Also, the mouth of the body is to speak, as you could see in Luke chapter 1, verse 19 to 20. The mouth is also for breathing, as you could see in Psalms chapter 145, verse 17, as well as the mouth is for tasting, eating, and drinking, as you could see written in Psalms 119, verses 103, as well as you could see this in Ezekiel chapter 3, verse 2. Now, as human beings eat through their mouths, the food goes into their bellies and out their draught. Now, the draught is like a sewer where all the waste enters and exits. I consider the draught of a human being to be their private parts and anus. Now, it is true that the private parts serve other purposes. However, it is also considered as one of the places that waste exits from the body. And in a sense, there are also other parts of the body that discharges waste, but that's not too important to make mention thereof. Anyways, you could read this in Matthew chapter 15, verse 17. The hairs on the head is a glory or a beauty. The gray hairs of the elderly age is for beauty, especially for men, as you could see in Proverbs chapter 16, verse 41. And the woman's hair in general is for beauty of any age, as you could see written in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 15. Now the mind, modernly called the brain of the body, is to know, think, and consider things, as you could see written in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 3, and Romans chapter 12, verse 16. The mind is a focal part of a human being. Hence, the mind is joined with the heart in its express and activity on earth, as you could see in Daniel chapter 5, verse 20. As for the heart of a human being is the place where they are able to think and consider things, as you could see in Proverbs chapter 23, verse 7. This is why the heart is also the place where the issues of life of a human being could come from. So guard it or keep it, as you could see in Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23. So by this I could say that the heart is also part of the body that speaks, but this speech is inwardly, as it is written of certain men whose mouths honor God, but their hearts are far from him, in Isaiah chapter 29, verse 13. Now, the rinds or the kidney is also a part of the body where reasoning, thinking, and considerations are done. I'm sure many people did not know that. You could see this in Psalms chapter 16, verse 7. Hence, it is written in Psalms chapter 26, verse 2, "Examine me, O Lord, and prove me. Try my reins and my heart." So, as a help and a strength to your kidneys, consider what you reason and think of on a daily basis, because it will be real help to your kidneys if you consider only on the right and uplifting things. So, now you've learned cures and maintenances for your reins or kidneys. So, continuing on to another body part, the hands of the body was made to work or to be active in something, as you could see in Proverbs chapter 31, verse 31. The feet of the body is to move about, as you could see in Psalms chapter 18, verse 36. Now, the bones of the body was made to be an identity of strength, both physical and emotional. Now, in relation to the physical strength identity of bones, you could read in Job chapter 10, verse 11, where it speaks of the bones being a fence around a human being. And we know that a fence is for protection and also for strength. And in relation to the emotional strength identity of bones, you could read in Proverbs chapter 15, verse 30, Proverbs chapter 16, verse 24, and Isaiah chapter 66, verse 13 to 14. There you will see these verses speaks of comfort, good news, and pleasant words being nourishment and health to bones. Vice versa, various emotions as shame, envy, and brokenness brings corruption, weakness, and deterioration in one's bones. You could read that in Proverbs chapter 12, verse 4, Proverbs chapter 14, verse 30, and Proverbs chapter 17, verse 22. So, yeah, I am sure that this is the first time that most of you are hearing this. So, now you've learned cures and maintenances for bones. Anyways, continuing, the skin of the body was made as a covering for the human being. You could read this in Job chapter 10, verse 11. Now, the skin of the body was also made to serve as an identity of nations who would imminently be born from the first two human beings. You could read this in Jeremiah chapter 13, verse 23. Now, the blood of a human being's body was made to be one of the parts to serve as the very life and or activity of a human being. And that is on earth, that is. And as for that, there is much to say about this. But for now, you could consider what I have said from Micah chapter 7, verse 2. In there, you will see that a human being's blood is equivalent to the life of a human being on earth. This is also why a human being is sometimes considered flesh and blood, as you could see written from Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, and Galatians chapter 1, verse 16. I will one day make an audio solely concerning blood. So for now, continuing. The body is also made to feel or be aware of various things. Now, I reference Genesis chapter 27, verse 21 in order to explain this, but I would advise to read from verse 1 to understand why I give such a reference. Now, I am aware that most people are saying, yes, we are aware of this, but there is a reason I get into all these details. So, I'm going to continue. The body of a human being has the ability to multiply the kind of being it was created as. By Genesis chapter 38 verse 9, we know that by the semen or sperm or discharge of a male human being is a female human being able to multiply. Biblically, the word semen is also called issue, as you could read in Ezekiel chapter 23 verse 20. And hence, sometimes the word issued is used in a sense to mean a child being born into this world. You can see this written in Isaiah chapter 49 verse 7 and also Job chapter 38 verse 8. Now, it is written in Hebrews chapter 7 verse 10 of a man named Abraham whose child named Levi was still in his loins or testicles. Biblically, it is called loins, and modern day it is called testicles or sometimes balls. So, any other human being who would be born is only found in the male human being's body. Now, the female human being's body is what needs or sews together or manifests the semen of a male body inserted therein. The Bible calls this place the matrix, as you could read in Exodus chapter 13, verse 12, or the womb, as Genesis chapter 30, verse 22 to 23 would say. The male and female human being's body are kin because God took a rib of the body of the first male human being in order to form the body of the first female human being, as you could see in Genesis chapter 2. Thereafter, every other human being, except in the case of the man Jesus Christ, was solely existent through sexual intercourse, sometimes called knowing, as you could see in Genesis chapter 4 verse 1, or going in onto, as Genesis chapter 16 verse 4 would say. Now, in all these things that I have mentioned thus far, things to do and things to be, yet if we reflect on Genesis chapter 1 and 2, we notice that none of these things could be possible when the body is gone. This is but one example of what death means. When the body is no more usable by a human being, it turns to dust, because from the dust of the earth was the body of every human being formed. And you could read this in Genesis chapter 2 verse 7. For a body unfit for living on the earth is no different from when the first two human beings had no body on the earth. So at times you might see the word died as written in Genesis chapter 5 verse 5, or sleep as written in John chapter 11 verses 11 through 14. Now there is also another word used to describe the death of a human being, and that term is called giving up the ghost. This is where the spirit of a human being comes into explanation. There are times when the word spirit is used interchangeably for the word breath or ghost. For Ecclesiastes chapter 12 verse 7 and Genesis chapter 2 verse 7, the words breath and spirit mean the same thing. Now we know by Genesis chapter 2 verse 7 that unless God breathed his breath of life into the nostrils or nose of the first human being after God formed his body, only then did man become a living soul. Only then was the man active on the earth. For the breath of a human being is the very spirit of a human being. Yes, the livelihood of a human being on earth is the spirit of a human being. Hence it is written in James chapter 2 verse 26 that the spirit without the body is dead. Now, the spirit of a human being or the breath of a human being is also considered the breath of God or the breath of the Almighty. God is able to give insight of various things to any human being by his breath of life, as you could see written in Job chapter 42 verse 8. The breath of life or the spirit of a human being is also the very lamp of God or the candle of God, as you could see in Proverbs chapter 20 verse 27. Now when I say lamp, it is in a sense that it is the very tracking device and information receiver of God. Hence, there is nothing good or evil a human being is able to do or not do that God is unable to know, because the life of a human being is solely because of God's breath. So in other words, if you do not want God to know and see you as a human being, you would find another way to live or to exist. So I guess you would have to find a way to live without your breath of life on the earth. And we know that is impossible. And might I add, I'm just saying, even if you end up doing that, God would still know, because God is everywhere, as I have said. He fills up heaven and earth. Anyways, continuing to the topic. That is why it is written of when the breath of life departs from a human being, it is called giving up the ghost, as you could see in Luke chapter 23, verse 46. As I have said, this is also a form of death for human beings. And this form of death is by choice. Hence the term given up or gave up instead of taken from. So the ghost was given up, the ghost was not taken from. That is why, again, it is a choice. For if you consider Luke chapter 23, verse 46, as I made mention, this speaks of the man Jesus Christ. Now, in John chapter 10, verses from 14 to 18, Jesus Christ says that it is He who lays His life down. And when the time came for when Jesus to fulfill these words occurred, Jesus said that He is going to commend or to direct His breath of life into the hands of God the Father, as you could see in Luke chapter 23, verse 46. Hence it is written in Proverbs chapter 17, verse 22, that a broken spirit dries up the bones, because sometimes people just lose the will to live, or they just purpose to depart from this life. I have heard of an account where a husband's wife died, and he knew what happened without anybody informing him as yet. So he was healthy at the time, and he said, I see my wife and I'll go meet her, and he died immediately. This is also a vivid example of giving up the ghost. So, we have spoken of the body and the spirit of the human being. Now let us talk of the soul of a human being. I'd first say that a human being does not have a soul, but a human being is a soul. It is also quite alright to say both, that a human being has a soul and a human being is a soul. Now the reason I say this is because if you consider the account of sequence of Genesis chapter 1 through 2, you would realize that mankind was already created from the sixth day. Hence, mankind was already an existence, and that existence was one just like God in being. We see that the body was formed for mankind in Genesis chapter 2, but there was still no activity or identity for mankind. It was when the spirit or breath was joined to the body, there was an identity of mankind being a living soul. And you could refer to this again in Genesis chapter 2, verse 7. Therefore, before the body formed for mankind and the spirit or breath given to them, they were just souls. So now, if souls are existent before the form of body and breath of life into them, then surely their existence does not cease or stop after they do not have a body applicable for earth or the breath of life. There is an emotion still active for a human being who is not alive on the earth anymore. You could read that in Revelations chapter 6, verses 9 to 10. For even as God is a spirit with activity, emotion, sight, hearing, feeling, and taste, so is a human being at all times. Nevertheless, a body and a spirit or breath is necessary for various activities of a human being on earth. Now, anyone who is surprised that I said that God and our spirits have all these qualities can refer to my former audio named What is a Spirit? And with these things being said, I will make an end of this audio. So, again, as always, I say if you like this content and if you have learned something, please do not keep it to yourself. Please share it. Also, subscribe and like this audio. So, thank you and have a good day.